Good morning. Tony couldn't be here. He called me yesterday afternoon, fairly late. He had trouble explaining what his problem was because he was coughing so hard. So you get the idea. He doesn't have a fever, but he was worried that if he has something and doesn't know what it is yet, that coughing at you would not be a kindly, reverential act. So I'm his backup plan this morning, which is always fun because I like being here and seeing you guys. So, gift of grace is the topic. And so I looked it up quickly. It's a term I've used a lot of my life, but I thought a definition wouldn't hurt. And the top one that is usually offered is God's favor to the unworthy. It's God's gift, and we haven't deserved it. We don't have it because we deserved it. We have it because he wanted to give it. That's a starting point. Favor to the unworthy. Because if you hear the line, Hail Mary, full of grace, all that's, and it says in the scripture that God says to her that you have found favor in the Lord. That means that she's gotten a lot of gifts already. And they're not gifts that we can take credit for. Sometimes I think God gives us less gifts than choices. But anyway, that's a starting point. And I think in language, too, we often refer to people who seem to exhibit grace or have it. Good morning. Good to see you. Full of grace, having received many gifts, all of them undeserved. For a few of you know this since the last time I've seen you all. I'm dealing with stage 4 cancer. And no, it's all right. And so far, we're beating it. This is prostate cancer, and it feeds off of testosterone. So the chemo that I'm taking is designed to purge my body of testosterone as completely as possible and starve the cancer to death, which is what we're doing. So I can give you, by the way, men need to be more comfortable talking about this stuff. Because if you're comfortable talking about it, thinking about it, then you might be comfortable having a checkup and finding out. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Is it a gift of grace, perhaps? Someone my age, the actuarial statistics for somebody my age, I turned 78 3 days ago, without any other information other than my age, my chances of being dead this time next year are about 50-50. That's not for somebody with cancer. That's just somebody with my age. Okay? So, yeah. So, the question, and our grammar deceives us and leads us into this. We talk about religion. We say we have a soul. No. We have a wallet. We have a social security number. We don't have a soul. The soul has us. First of all, the soul has us. We are souls. So the real question isn't why do I have a soul? It's why does my soul have a body? What am I here to be doing? What are we here to do with these bodies of ours? That's, I think, sets the question upright. What are we here to do? What are we as souls, as embodied souls? What are we here to do with the body we've been given? And cancer is a real tap on the shoulder to remind us all, since you don't know how much time you have. But then I never knew how much time I had before I got cancer, and neither do you. So the real question is, what are we going to do with these bodies of ours? That's the real question. And we don't know how much time that we have to give whatever that is. And it's not a gift until you give it. I spent years and years at my old school doing fundraising concerts with students. We did some locally inside the school, and we did some called Shelter from the Storm, where we got the best singers, dancers, and musicians from all over Cape Cod to do an annual concert. We fed the Faith Family Kitchen for a whole year with the proceeds from one concert. We rebuilt 10 living units at the Shelter for Battered Women and Children with one concert. We raised enough money for the Duffy Health Center to open a clinic for opioid-addicted young people with one concert. The power, the people you want to applaud aren't here. It's the kids who did this stuff. The kids got to pick who we helped. When the concert got going, we had CEOs of local charities coming to visit because $25,000, which we could raise with one concert, was a useful amount of money. Most kids, they do a car wash, they do a bake sale, and they make $217, and they're smart enough to know that's not going to move the needle. I mean, it's helpful. It's better than to have not done it. But if you want to really do something when you're young, the performance art is the most powerful fundraising tool available. And the kids ran the concerts. I would get up and thank everybody for coming and sit down and take pictures, and there wouldn't be an adult behind the stage the whole time. And they were great. They went really, really well. I finally retired, and then COVID hit, and it would have shut us down anyway. And I'm hoping that somebody will revive it. And actually, someone in Falmouth has, and they did their first one last year. And they don't call it Shelter from the Storm; they call it Be the Light. Be the Light. Because the first time we did it for the Noah Shelter. And these were kids from all over the Cape, never met each other before. And somebody from the shelter came backstage and got them all quiet for a second. And he said, because of you, there will be people who are alive at this time next year who would not have been but for you. Can you imagine what a powerful message that is to young people? And don't buy into all of the stuff you hear on media about our kids. You know, I know the cell phones are an issue. Our children today are as hungry for grace, as hungry to help as any generation. American high school kids donate every year 1 billion hours of community service. 1 billion hours of community service from kids, and that's something you never hear on TV. It's become so ingrained now that schools have a requirement. Most schools have a requirement now for graduating seniors. We won't let you out of the building until you have done your public service. What shall it be? Hunger for grace. We live in an age that is starving for grace. Starving for grace. Before I totally leave the cancer, there's a couple things that I'm learning. One, I did a column that I published called in 2024, Welcome to Cancerland. That was about my first impressions of getting sick, or being sick, because I'd been sick for a while and didn't know it. I think a lot of our society has been sick for a while and doesn't know it. And we need, more than we need an election in the fall, we need an intervention. Before we lose all of our grace, I think if somebody, by the way, I'm totally ad-libbing. I decided when I talked to Tony last night that I would take his theme and just see where it went, because I've been with you guys long enough now, for enough years, that it seemed maybe more, I don't know, realistic to actually have a conversation with you than to preach at you. I mean, people get preached at all the time, talked at all the time. Mark Twain once said it's a terrible death being talked to death. I think for someone who says, well, I've had a good life, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, they probably won't make it. If you have cancer, you have to get pissed. You have to get in fighting trim. You have to decide if this is a life you want, if you love what you do and who you do it with, and I do, and I've been lucky to love what I do and who I do it with most all my adult life. I'm a very, very lucky guy. And I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. So I don't know if I'm allowed to swear in a church, but I'm a photographer, and I have this beautiful picture that I took out in the Rocky Mountains of this road that winds up into the mountains. And in Gothic letters, I've added to it, "Fuck cancer." And under it, in glowing gold letters, live for this. Live for this. This morning, I'm living for you. I'm glad to be here. This holds me to earth, this grace of being in your company, of having Tony call and say, can you help us out here? When I was a senior in high school, I stopped being a Christian. I had an argument with St. Paul. I didn't have any arguments with Jesus. It wasn't anything he ever said or did that I didn't find extraordinary, but I had a problem with St. Paul. And his role, understand, Jesus didn't talk about himself much. He talked about people in trouble a lot, though. People who needed help, people who needed love, people who needed to be seen. I took that into my teaching profession. You have a split screen. I've got children whose parents are paying money to have them taught geography, ancient history, whatever it is. But on the other side of the split screen, I have souls in bodysuits in front of me. Some are in boy suits, some are in girl suits. I've come to think it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, really. What do the souls need that are in our presence every day? And it's not to be evaluated, it's to be seen. There's a good line in, what's the movie where everybody's in blue, the Na'vi? I see you. Avatar, thank you. I see you. At pivotal moments when somebody is in crisis and the person helping them looks at them and says, I see you. We all need that. Everybody needs to be seen all the time. Seen through loving eyes. And everything becomes possible. Starting with that. My problem was I went to a boarding school, a very old-fashioned school modeled on the British. It was a very accelerated school. I flunked out of it twice. Helpless in math. Just couldn't do it. I went to school. I'm ADD. Nobody knew what that was in the 1950s and early 60s. Bless his heart, my father called me the laziest white man he had ever known to my face. I remember waking up nights sometimes to go to the bathroom and hearing my worried parents downstairs wondering out loud to each other whether I would ever amount to anything. They worried about it. It's not their fault. You know how AD kids are in school. And actually, it's not attention deficit, it's attention everything disorder. You're in that classroom and you're hearing through the wall what's going on in that room, and you're hearing through the other wall what's going on in that room, and there's stuff going on outside the window, and you're wondering what that's all about, and you've got stuff going on in your head, and your teacher's talking at you, and all of this. It's attention everything. It's all of that's going on. And that kind of wiring is a gift. Turns out it's a gift of grace to see the world everywhere all at once. It's a gift of grace. If you can survive school, if you can survive having your ego ground into the dirt by well-meaning teachers and frightened parents, you actually come out the other side being rather useful. Lots of our music and inventions and all sorts of things come from people who are wired that way. Attention, everything, all the time. It's actually a gift of grace. If you have kids or grandkids who are ADD, share that with them. Don't let them grind you down in school. You're going to be all right. You have a gift. Every child needs to know that they have already are recipients of grace. And they were the moment they were born. And they don't know that because it seems like everything is difficult and everyone's mad at them. And if they're not angry, they're disappointed. That's even harder for a kid than for a parent to say, I'm really mad at you, is to have a parent look at you and say, boy, I'm disappointed. Ooh, that hurts. I'm disappointed. So I was in this boarding school, and it was an all-male school, and it was prom, so girls were coming up, which is a big deal. This is 1964. And the school was kind of freaked out, as it always was when girls were coming onto the campus. And this was a school with a lot of money. I was on scholarship there. Why they gave me a scholarship, I have no idea. But anyway, they did. But, I mean, we had a kid who graduated with me whose graduation present from his father was a high-rise apartment building in downtown New York. All of the rent from that building for the rest of his life. And he had the penthouse suite for himself. At the age of 17, he would never have to lift a finger for the rest of his life. What a curse. What a curse to give somebody that at the age of 17. But there was that kind of money. Anyway, they could hire these really fantastic preachers from all over the country to come and talk to us on Sundays. And they got a Scotch Presbyterian from Aberdeen with flaming red hair. And so here's the girls are coming in the next couple days. And he picks Paul's Galatians. Do not satisfy the desires of the flesh, for the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. And that was so transparent. I mean, we were having our prom and the girls were coming. And here's St. Paul. It really harked me off. And I left there with steam coming out my ears, and I went back to my dormitory room, and I had my Bible, and I this was my question: can you be a Christian without Paul? That's what I needed to know. Can Jesus be enough? Can I be a Christian without Paul? And I read the whole New Testament that afternoon, and I thought about it, and I decided actually no. Christianity, at least, needed him because Jesus didn't talk about himself much, and the question was out. So what was that anyway? Who was that? And Paul answered it. Actually, the number of people answered it, and there was an argument, and Paul won. That's why he's in the Bible. So I broke up with Christianity. Like breaking up with the girl that, and it wasn't that, that she's done anything wrong. As you look in the future and you don't see both of you there, it's done. If you look in the future and you don't see something there, it's done. And I had no destination to go to. I had nowhere else to go. So out I went and into college and into, because Vietnam War was happening, into the military service. And you're filling out all these forms, and one of them is Jewish, Christian, Catholic, whatever. And there was a blank space, because I didn't want anybody bugging me about this stuff at that point in my life. So I invented a religion and put it there. Sacramentalism. Sounds convincing. And I got to boot camp, and I thought I got this covered, because there aren't going to be any meetings of sacramentalists out here. And so they came on the intercom, out of your racks, everybody. You will go to Jewish services, Catholic or Protestant, up. So I was raised Episcopalian, and so I went to Protestant service. Shortest service I've ever attended. All I remember was that the guy ended by saying, remember, your soul may belong to God, but your ass belongs to the United States Navy, and don't you forget it. Dismissed. So I forgot all about sacramentalism. It wasn't doing me any good. Got out of college, was working in Arizona. The guy that hired me explained to me that there was a very evangelical family that owned this company, and that I would probably do very well not to get into discussions of religion with anybody. So for 3 years I did that. And my best friend in the company was going through a very painful divorce, not a religious guy. And he decided that he just needed something, and so one Sunday he just picked the church nearest to him and he went. So they have the processional, and the choir comes up to the front, and the minister comes up, and the cross is carried up. They all get to the front. The minister turns, faces his congregation, lifts his vestment off, drapes it over the communion rail, and announces to his congregation that he is leaving the ministry to open a casino in Reno, Nevada. And he left. He says that, walks out the door goes boom, and everybody's looking at everybody going, what the... So my friend comes to work the next day and he says, Larry, I can't catch a break. And he told me what had happened. I mean, it wasn't funny, but it kind of was. I mean, you laughed, right? So I'm still chuckling about this, and one of the secretaries came in and she asked me what was so funny, and I told her what had happened to my friend. And that was her opening. And she said, oh, well, what church do you go to? And I had been warned. And then I remembered. And I told her I'm a sacramentalist. And now I have to make it up as I go. She says, I've never heard of that. And I said, well, we're a very obscure group. She said, what's it about? I said, well, you remember your catechism. An outward and visible, a sacrament is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. Well, we sacramentalists believe that it would be a mistake to set aside 7 specific acts. If you're living life properly, everything we do should be an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. It's that simple. Oh, she said, that's quite lovely. Where's your church? I said, well, if you think through the implications of sacramentalism, if every act of life should be sacramental, it would be a mistake to set aside one small patch of real estate for the practicing of sacraments. The world becomes your church then. And you could tell she felt that she was losing her control of the conversation. But she had one more question. She said, so how many of you are there? And I said, I don't know. It's, having no specific time and place to meet. But we do seem to recognize one another when we meet. And I realized that I've been a sacramentalist all my life. And you can be a sacramentalist Christian, you can be a sacramentalist Hindu, you can be a sacramentalist Muslim, you can be a sacramentalist everything. You can be a sacramentalist atheist almost. Atheists can be highly moral people, but if we're talking about grace, an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace, everything we do should be an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. We have to love each other. And that it can't be based on desire. Not that kind of love, because as you well know, some people are really annoying. They make it really hard. So we can't love them based on desire. It has to be based on policy, on a decision that we make every morning when we wake up, that we're going to go out there and greet every person we meet with a gentle benevolence as a policy. And we're watching our country being torn to pieces. And there's one real simple thing that you can ask when you get into it. Don't get into arguments with people. I've asked in church, how many of you have ever had a political argument that ended by the other person bursting into tears and saying, my God, how could I have been so wrong for so long? No, I mean it. Raise your hands. How many of you ever had an argument that ended that way? Okay, point taken. If you already know that's where it's going to end up, why are we going there over and over and over and over again and making people angry and pushing them away? Either there is more love or its absence. Everything we say, everything we do, either there is love or its absence. I think it's that simple. And that's something we can share with other people and say, look, I don't want to be mad at you. This whole dynamic that our country has fallen into is the more wicked we can imagine our opponents, the more righteous we get to feel in opposing them. The more wicked we imagine our opponents, the more righteous we get to feel in opposing them. And that's a narcissistic feedback loop. And it's poison. Because the wickedness of the other is a necessary component for us to get the emotional kick that we're looking for. And politics is not supposed to be about that. It's supposed to be about the formation of public policy for the greater good. Formation of public policy for the greater good. Not something to make you feel righteous so that you can despise your adversaries. It will destroy everything we love about this country if we let it go. A good friend of mine, Steve Brown, who lives out in Arizona now, he defined evil the best I've ever heard. Evil, he said, is not just doing wicked things. It's convincing other people to do wicked things and feel good about themselves while doing it. And feel good about themselves while doing it. That's the poison. That's the whole business that I'm talking about, this toxic righteousness of imagining your opponents as being wicked so that you get the kick when you oppose them. That whole thing. Either there is love or it's absence. And you can share that with people and say, look, I'm not sure I got all this right. You might be right about whatever particular thing we're talking about, and I might be wrong. Here's what I'm trying to use as my guide, though, and I'd recommend it to you. Whatever we decide, is there going to be more love or its absence? And see where we get from there, including between ourselves. I'm going to wind up. There's an image of Snow White, the wonderful Disney cartoon. I remember I was a child when I saw it. And the way it ends after all of the stuff that goes on is that she's been tranced into a sleep. So there she is, surrounded on a bed of flowers, waiting to be kissed awake by the world. Lying on a bed of flowers, waiting to be kissed awake by the world. Everybody is lying on their bed of flowers, waiting to be kissed awake by the world. And we know the world is a rough place, and there are some people, and you know this, they're not kissed awake. They're slapped awake by the world. And we need to love them and lift them up. That's our job. That's what grace means in practice. If you've been given gifts, and we all have, and that was part of the act of teaching, was to let each kid know you have been born and come to this place with a collection of gifts for the world. Every one of you is a gift for the world. And you're in school to find out what those gifts are, so you can give them. It's not a gift until it's given. To get a 7th grade child to get up on a stage and with spotlights to perform for the first time, they're terrified. You would be. They're terrified. How do you get them to do it? You tell them what the guy said to the kids after the first shelter concert. There are going to be people who are alive this time next year because of what you've done. You and all the other people who are going to get on this stage who are older than you and more experienced than you are all participating in something. You're helping somebody. Somebody's going to have dinner on the table this week and the next week and the week after that because of what you've done, because of your courage in coming up on stage and giving your gift. It's not a gift until it's given. I'd like to close with a poem. I realized I'd written a poem about grace in 1995. It's called A Prayer for Our Children. I have heard that you've been empty now for years. You've been waiting for someone to touch you, for someone to wrench you out into some new beginning, something you had dreaded, or because you were comfortably bound to the rack you knew, for someone to pour out grace like honey, sheeting glass, pouring golden through your fingers, into your face, lick your honeyed tongues with liquid grace, and head back, eyes back, take you lifting away from earth. I have seen the snow falling down in the dim light, like ash sifting through the dark pines, silted down, felt it like velvet, the rich river bottom, with your ashes silting down from where in the dim light the snow flew and melted down, bore you grain by grain to the rolling waves, set you down with liquid hands, with wet fingers into the earth, that new life might come from you. I would ask that like flakes of ash come down to water's edge, like God who waits to dig her hands beneath the back of those who sleep and bear them up with arched backs, who washes the faces of the beaten many from the cup that pours out grace like honey. Lift my children's souls to pour like smoke through mountains down each stream like earth to the sea. Please give thy word, you who see the tear falling down the face turned away from you, that their sons will not go out, that light from their eyes will light earth, that from their lips will burst sweet birds to sing, that from their minds will pour each new thing of use, that their hands will lift the poor, and from their love will flow each good thing given them long before their feet first touched earth. Namaste. No.
You have been watching the message from our Sunday celebration service here at Unity on Cape Cod, providing a positive path for spiritual living. Please join us every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at 147 Walton Ave, Hyannis, Mass., and visit us online at unityoncapecod.org. This video was made possible in part through a grant from Unity Worldwide Ministries and the Templeton Foundation.